"Don't embarrass your sister," my dad snapped, his voice tight as he adjusted his tuxedo. "Robert's father is a decorated four-star general. Just sit there, keep your mouth shut, and try not to remind everyone that you're the black sheep of this family." For 22 years, my family treated me like a ghost, an inconvenient disappointment who preferred quiet logistics work over corporate status. But that night, as 30 high-profile guests gathered in the grand dining room, my dad raised his glass and officially introduced me to the room as our resident family failure. The room went dead silent. But before my sister could smirk, General Samuel Vance stood up, walked past my father, extended his hand to me, and snapped a crisp, unwavering salute. "Ma'am," the general said, his voice echoing across the room. "It's an honor to finally stand in the presence of the officer who saved my entire division." My dad nearly dropped his wine glass. "Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached." My name is Rachel Carter, and at 47 years old, I have spent the better part of my life learning a quiet truth. The people who share your blood are often the last ones to ever truly see you. Growing up in the Carter household meant living under the oppressive shadow of my father, Arthur Carter. Arthur was a man obsessed with status, titles, and public prestige. To him, children were not human beings to be nurtured, but assets to be displayed. My younger sister Clara understood the assignment early on. She was polished, performative, and eager to chase corporate titles that our father could brag about at country club dinners. Arthur funded her every ambition, lavishing her with praise while grooming her to be the crown jewel of the family. Then there was me. I was the quiet child who preferred practical action over empty posturing. At 18, unable to stomach the relentless emotional abuse and conditional love, I packed a single bag and walked away from Arthur's estate. While Clara climbed the corporate ladder, I chose a very different path. One in specialized military logistics and emergency civil coordination. It was demanding, high-stakes work that required me to live under a veil of strict privacy. To my father, however, my choice was an unforgivable betrayal. Because I didn't hold a flashy corporate title or parade my life on social media, Arthur wrote me off entirely. For over 2 decades, he dismissed my career as glorified clerical work and openly referred to me as the black sheep, the absolute failure of the Carter bloodline. The invite to my father's estate hadn't come out of love. It had come out of sheer necessity. Arthur was hosting an exclusive formal dinner party to celebrate Clara's engagement to Robert Vance, the rising star of a prominent political family. More importantly, Robert's father was General Samuel Vance, a legendary 4-star military figure whose name alone opened doors in every high-ranking circle in the country. Arthur needed every member of the family present to project the illusion of a perfect, united dynasty. When I arrived at the estate, the grand dining room was already buzzing with 30 of the city's most influential elites. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above a table set with fine china and heavy silverware. The moment Arthur spotted me crossing the foyer, he grabbed my elbow with a grip tight enough to bruise and pulled me into his private study. "Listen to me very carefully, Rachel," he whispered, his eyes narrowing as he adjusted his tuxedo. "Robert's father is a decorated 4-star general. Important people are in that room tonight, and I will not have you ruining Clara's moment with your pathetic, unimpressive life." He didn't ask how I was doing. He didn't ask about my work. He simply paraded his open disdain, making it crystal clear where I stood. "You will sit at the very end of the table," Arthur commanded, pointing a sharp finger at my chest. "You will keep your mouth shut, you will smile politely, and you will try not to remind everyone present that you are the black sheep of this family. If anyone asks, you do administrative paperwork. Do not embarrass your sister." I looked at my father's flushed, arrogant face, felt the icy coldness in his voice, and simply nodded. He thought he was putting me in my place, completely unaware of the storm he was setting in motion. I took my assigned seat at the far end of the long mahogany table, furthest from the head where Arthur, Clara, Robert, and General Samuel Vance were seated. Throughout the first few courses, Arthur held court, loudly boasting about Clara's corporate promotions and Robert's family legacy. Every few minutes, he would cast a warning glance down the length of the table, making sure I was remaining silent and invisible. As the main course was served, Arthur tapped his silver spoon against his crystal wine glass. The room fell quiet as he stood up, swelling with pride. "Friends, distinguished guests," Arthur began, his voice echoing across the dining room. "Tonight is about family, excellence, and legacy. We are gathered to celebrate my brilliant daughter Clara, who represents everything the Carter name stands for: hard work, high achievement, and unquestionable success." Polite applause rippled through the room. Clara beamed, sitting up taller beside Robert. But Arthur wasn't finished. He turned his eyes down the table toward me, a cruel, deliberate smile playing on his lips. "Of course," Arthur continued, his tone dripping with condescending sarcasm. "Not every branch of the family tree blooms with equal success. My eldest Rachel, sitting quietly at the end there, chose a somewhat less ambitious route in life. While Clara reaches for the stars, Rachel is content with glorified clerical work. But we love our family failure all the same." A few guests offered awkward, uncomfortable chuckles, shifting in their seats. Clara smirked, and Arthur raised his glass in a mock toast to my public embarrassment. I didn't flinch. I kept my posture straight and met his gaze with absolute composure. Just as Clara opened her mouth to speak, General Samuel Vance suddenly froze. His eyes locked onto me, his fork hovering in midair, as his expression shifted instantly from polite detachment to utter, profound shock. General Vance slowly set his utensil down, the heavy silence in the room thickening as 30 pairs of eyes followed his gaze. Ignoring Arthur entirely, the four-star general stood up, pushed his chair back, and began walking down the long dining table directly toward me. Arthur's smug expression wavered. "General Vance? Is something wrong?" he asked, a nervous tremor creeping into his voice. The general didn't answer. He stopped 3 feet away from my chair, came to sharp attention, and brought his hand up to render a crisp, unwavering military salute. "Ma'am," General Vance said, his booming voice cutting through the quiet room like a blade. "I never thought I'd have the honor of meeting you in person. It is a privilege to stand before you, Commander Carter." Gasps echoed around the table. Arthur nearly dropped his wineglass, his face flushing from arrogant pride to deep confusion. "Commander?" "General, there must be a mistake. She's just a—" "Quiet," General Vance snapped, turning a razor-sharp glare toward my father. "You have no idea who you are talking to." The general turned back to the room, addressing the stunned guests. 9 years ago, during Operation Fallen Shield in the Middle East, my entire forward command division was cut off behind enemy lines. The chain of command collapsed, supply lines were severed, and we were facing total annihilation. The Pentagon put one person in charge of the emergency logistics extraction. He gestured respectfully toward me. Commander Rachel Carter sat in a classified tactical bunker for 72 straight hours, outmaneuvering enemy intelligence, rerouting military transport, and orchestrating a flawless air and ground extraction. She saved 248 American lives that night, including mine. The dining room went completely silent. Clara sat with her mouth open. Robert looked at me with wide-eyed awe, and my father looked as if the ground beneath him had just swallowed him whole. Arthur's face turned an unhealthy shade of purple as he stammered, trying desperately to regain control of the room. "General, please, you must have her confused with someone else. Rachel is just... She works in basic administration. She never told us..." Because true heroes don't feel the need to parade their medals in front of civilians, General Vance interjected coldly, shutting my father down with an authority that left no room for debate. Commander Carter's operations were classified under national security protocols for years. She received the Distinguished Civilian Service Decoration, the highest honor a civilian logistics strategist can achieve. You called her a failure, Arthur, but in my world, she is a legend. A heavy, suffocating awkwardness settled over the room. Clara sat frozen in her chair, her face burning with humiliation, as the spotlight completely shifted away from her engagement and onto the sister she had spent years looking down on. Robert, her fiancé, looked at Clara with a sudden flash of disillusionment, then turned to me, his eyes filled with genuine, profound respect. "Commander," Robert said, standing up and offering a respectful nod. "It is an absolute honor to have you at this table." The high-ranking guests, who had previously ignored me, suddenly leaned forward, their eyes wide with fascination. The wealthy politicians and corporate executives who Arthur had spent weeks trying to impress completely abandoned their polite small talk about Clara's career. They began whispering to one another, staring at me not as the black sheep, but as the most powerful, respected person sitting in the room. My father sat back down slowly, his hands trembling as he realized his supreme arrogance had just destroyed his own grand evening. The silence in the room was absolute as every eye remained fixed on me. I calmly set my napkin down on the table, stood up, and looked at the crowd of influential guests who were waiting for me to speak. "General Vance, thank you for your kind words," I said, my voice calm, controlled, and echoing effortlessly across the room. The work I did was never about recognition, titles, or applause. It was about duty, integrity, and bringing brave men and women home safely to their families. I slowly turned my head toward the head of the table, locking eyes directly with my father. Arthur shrank back into his chair, unable to meet my gaze. "For 22 years, Arthur," I continued, addressing him by his first name in front of all his peers, "you measured worth by corner offices, vanity titles, and how much a person could brag at country clubs. You called me a failure because I didn't fit into your shallow definition of success. But true achievement isn't measured by status or empty posturing. It's measured by the lives you touch, the integrity you maintain, and the responsibility you carry when no one is watching." Clara kept her eyes glued to her plate, completely silent. Arthur's lips trembled as he tried to formulate a response, but no words came out. He was completely stripped of his arrogant shield, exposed before the very elites he had tried so hard to impress. "Enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone," I said politely, offering a respectful nod to General Vance and Robert. Without waiting for another word, I picked up my coat, turned my back on the Carter family, and walked out of the estate with my head held high, leaving my father stuttering in absolute humiliation. In the days following the dinner party, the fallout was swift and absolute. My father tried calling me dozens of times, leaving frantic voicemails attempting to apologize, smooth things over, and desperately invite me to corporate networking events so he could parade my military credentials to his business associates. But I knew his regret wasn't genuine, it was merely damage control. I blocked his number, setting firm, permanent boundaries, and cut ties with the toxicity I had outgrown long ago. Clara's engagement survived, but the dynamic had irrevocably shifted. The Carter family name no longer carried the superficial prestige Arthur had spent a lifetime building. Instead, the story of his public humiliation became a quiet legend among the city's elite. I returned to my life, content and peaceful. True fulfillment didn't come from forcing my way into a family that refused to value me, but from building a life rooted in quiet purpose, honor, and self-respect. I didn't need Arthur's validation to know my worth. I had proven it to myself years ago. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have walked away, or confronted your family sooner? Comment your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the videos on screen for more incredible stories.